This is a meaningful and heartwarming story. You should listen to it because it will make our lives more beautiful. Ethan and Claire, a hardworking farming couple, lived a simple but happy life with their newborn son, Oliver. One fateful day, Ethan rescued a wounded stray dog, Bruno, and brought him home. Bruno became more than just a pet. He became their son's guardian, their farm's protector, and their most loyal friend. But when danger struck, Ethan made a heartbreaking mistake that nearly cost him everything. What happened next will surprise you. Stay until the end to witness a powerful story of loyalty, regret, and redemption. Hi everyone. Welcome to Narrated Tales, where every story touches the heart. Today I am very happy to share a new story with you. Let's get started. The sun was beginning to dip behind the rolling hills, casting a warm golden glow over the vast fields of wheat and barley. The soft rustling of leaves in the evening breeze and the distant chirping of crickets filled the countryside with a sense of peacefulness. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. His muscles ached from the long day of labor, but he didn't mind. Life on the farm was hard, but it was honest and it was his. As he walked along the dirt path leading home, his heart swelled with anticipation. Claire would be waiting for him, her smile the first thing he would see as he stepped through the wooden door of their small but cozy house. He could already imagine the scent of warm bread filling the air, the flickering light of the oil lamp casting a soft glow in the kitchen. And then there was the baby. Their first child was due in just a few weeks. The thought filled Ethan with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Would he be a good father? Could he provide enough for his family? He pushed the doubts aside. He would work harder, wake up earlier, do whatever it took to give his child the best life possible. As he rounded the last bend before reaching home, a faint whimpering sound made him stop. He turned his head toward the side of the path, his eyes narrowing. Something was moving in the underbrush. Slowly, cautiously, Ethan stepped closer. He crouched down, peering through the tall grass. A dog lay curled up beneath the bushes, its body trembling. It was thin, its ribs visible beneath its muddy fur. Blood was matted along its side, and its left hind leg was twisted at an awkward angle. It had been injured, possibly by a hunter's trap or another animal. Ethan hesitated. A wounded animal could be dangerous, but looking into the dog's eyes, dark, frightened and pleading, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Easy there, boy," Ethan murmured, slowly reaching out a hand. The dog let out a low, pained whine, but didn't snap or growl. It was too weak to resist. Without another thought, Ethan carefully lifted the animal into his arms. The dog's body tensed at first, but then it went limp, exhausted from pain. As he carried the injured creature toward home, he knew Claire would not be happy. Claire stood in the small kitchen, carefully kneading a batch of dough as the fireplace crackled softly in the corner. She hummed to herself, pausing only to place a protective hand over her swollen belly. Their child kicked gently in response, bringing a smile to her lips. Her happiness was interrupted by the sound of the front door creaking open. "Ethan?" she called, turning to greet him. But the smile faded when she saw what he was carrying. "Oh my goodness, what is that?" she gasped, her eyes widening as she took in the injured dog in his arms. Ethan shifted his grip slightly, lowering the animal onto a pile of old blankets near the fireplace. "I found him on the way home," he said, brushing dirt from his shirt. "He's hurt. I couldn't just leave him." Claire folded her arms, concern etched into her features. "Ethan, we have enough to worry about. The baby is almost here, and we barely have extra food as it is." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "I know, Claire, but look at him." He gestured toward the dog, who let out another weak whimper, struggling to lift its head. "He wouldn't have survived the night out there. I'll take care of him. I'll find food for him. Make sure he doesn't get in the way." Claire sighed, shaking her head. "You have the kindest heart. Ethan." She crouched down beside the dog, gently running her fingers along its matted fur. The animal flinched slightly but didn't pull away. "All right," she said softly. "We'll help him." Ethan smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you." That night they cleaned the dog's wounds, bandaged its leg, and gave it fresh water. Despite Claire's initial worries, she too began to warm up to the creature. Days turned into weeks, and the dog, now named Bruno, grew stronger. He was larger than they had first thought, a powerful-looking dog with a thick golden coat and intelligent eyes. He followed Ethan around the farm during the day, watching him work, and at night, he curled up beside the fireplace, his ears twitching at every sound. And then there was Oliver. Claire gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment Ethan held his son for the first time, he felt an overwhelming sense of love and responsibility. Bruno seemed to sense the importance of the child as well. From the very first night Oliver was brought home, Bruno never left his side. He would lie beside the crib, his dark eyes watchful, his ears always alert. When Oliver cried, Bruno would whine softly, as if trying to soothe him. As months passed, Bruno became the baby's silent guardian. Ethan and Claire trusted him completely. Bruno's loyalty and bravery soon became legendary. Foxes often crept into the farm at night, trying to steal chickens, but Bruno was always there to chase them off. One evening, as Ethan and Claire prepared for bed, a loud commotion erupted outside. Ethan grabbed a lantern and rushed to the yard. Bruno stood in the middle of the chicken coop, growling fiercely. A pair of red eyes gleamed in the darkness. A fox, larger than usual, stood at the edge of the fence, its teeth bared. The fox lunged, but Bruno was faster. He sprang forward, snarling, and with one powerful bite sent the intruder scurrying back into the woods. Ethan watched in awe. Bruno trotted back to him, his tail wagging slightly as if expecting praise. Ethan knelt, scratching behind his ears. "Good boy," he murmured. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Claire stood in the doorway, holding Oliver close. As she watched Bruno stand guard, his gaze scanning the tree line for any remaining threats, she realized something. Bruno wasn't just a farm dog anymore. He was part of the family. That night, no one could have known what was coming. That soon Bruno's greatest test was just around the corner, and that his loyalty would be put to the ultimate test, in a way no one ever expected. The sun rose over the farm, casting golden rays over the frost-covered fields. It had been nearly a year since Bruno had joined their family, and in that time, he had become more than just a dog. He was a protector, a guardian, a friend. Oliver, now 1 year old, had learned to walk, his tiny legs stumbling across the wooden floor. His favorite companion, aside from his parents, was Bruno. The dog never strayed far from his side, always watching, always listening. That morning, Ethan left early to work in the fields. "I won't be back until late afternoon," he told Claire, kissing her cheek. "Take care of Oliver." Claire smiled. "Of course, we'll be fine." Bruno, standing near the doorway, let out a soft huff as if to say, "I will watch over them." Ethan chuckled, rubbing behind the dog's ears. "I know, boy, keep them safe." With that, he slung his axe over his shoulder and walked toward the fields. The farm felt peaceful. Claire went about her morning chores, feeding the chickens, tending to the vegetable garden, and checking the fence for any signs of damage. Meanwhile, Oliver played on the porch, giggling as he tried to grab Bruno's tail. The dog lay beside him, patient as ever, his dark eyes scanning the yard for any danger. It was an ordinary morning, until the wolf arrived. It came from the woods, creeping through the trees. A lone wolf, hungry and desperate. The winter had been harsh and prey was scarce. The wolf had caught the scent of food, of warmth, of something vulnerable. Claire, still busy in the back garden, had no idea what was approaching. Neither did Oliver. But Bruno knew. The moment the wolf stepped into the yard, Bruno's ears perked. His muscles tensed, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Oliver, sensing the change, stopped giggling. His tiny hands grabbed at Bruno's fur, looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. Bruno stepped forward, placing himself between the child and the approaching danger. The wolf snarled, its yellow eyes locked onto Oliver. Bruno barked, a warning, a challenge. The wolf lunged, and Bruno met it head-on. The fight was brutal. Bruno and the wolf collided, rolling across the wooden porch in a flurry of fur and claws. The wolf's jaws snapped, aiming for Bruno's throat, but Bruno twisted, his teeth sinking into the wolf's shoulder instead. A pained yelp echoed through the farm. Oliver began crying, frightened by the chaos. Bruno's blood boiled with fury. He had fought foxes before, but this was different. The wolf was stronger, faster, and far more dangerous. The wolf clawed at Bruno's side, tearing into his flesh. Blood splattered the wooden floor. But Bruno didn't stop fighting. He bit, lunged, snarled, his only thought, protect Oliver. The wolf, realizing it couldn't win, stumbled back, growling in frustration. And then it fled, vanishing into the woods. Bruno stood there, panting, his body trembling from pain and exhaustion. Blood dripped from his wounds, staining the porch. He turned to Oliver, who was still sitting there, unharmed, his cries turning into soft whimpers. Bruno let out a tired sigh and collapsed beside him. He had done his job. The child was safe. The front door swung open. Ethan stepped inside, his boots heavy with mud, expecting to see his wife and child. But instead, he saw blood. His heart stopped. His eyes darted around the room, panic gripping his chest. The wooden floor was streaked with red, and Bruno lay there, his golden fur stained with blood, unmoving. And Oliver? Where was Oliver? Ethan's mind raced. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. And then his fear twisted into rage. Bruno had been left alone with Oliver. There was blood everywhere, and his son was nowhere to be seen. Ethan's hands curled into fists, his stomach twisted with dread and fury. Bruno, his once trusted companion, had betrayed them. Blind with emotion, Ethan grabbed the closest tool, a heavy wooden staff leaning against the wall. His vision blurred. His mind screamed. Without hesitation, he struck. The crack of wood against flesh echoed through the house. Bruno let out a soft whimper, but he didn't move. Ethan raised the staff again, his entire body shaking with rage and grief. "How could you?" he roared. And then, a voice. "Ethan, stop!" Claire. She stood at the back doorway, holding Oliver in her arms, safe and sound. Ethan's grip loosened. His heart slammed against his ribs. His wife's face was pale, her expression filled with horror. What? His voice broke as he looked at Oliver, alive, unharmed, blinking at him in confusion. Claire ran inside, her eyes darting to Bruno, who still lay motionless on the floor. "What have you done?" she whispered. Ethan's world tilted. I thought," his voice shook. "The blood. I thought he—" Claire fell to her knees beside Bruno, pressing a trembling hand to his chest. "He saved Oliver," she choked out. "A wolf got into the house. Bruno fought it off." Ethan felt the breath leave his lungs. The truth hit him like a dagger to the heart. Bruno had never attacked Oliver. Bruno had protected him, and he had just hurt the one who saved his son. Ethan dropped the staff, his hands shaking violently. He sank to his knees, staring at Bruno's still body. Guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. "No!" His voice broke. He reached out, his hands trembling, gently touching the dog's fur. "Bruno, I'm sorry." The dog's chest rose faintly, a shallow breath escaping his lips. He was alive, but barely. Ethan's throat tightened. "We have to save him," he whispered. Claire, tears streaming down her face, nodded. Together they worked desperately to stop the bleeding, wrapping Bruno's wounds, whispering pleas for him to hold on. Ethan stayed by his side all night, his heart heavy with regret. "I should have trusted you," he murmured, stroking Bruno's head. "Please don't leave us." Bruno didn't move, but his breathing remained steady, and for the first time since Ethan had walked into that house, hope flickered in his chest. The night was long and heavy with silence, except for the soft crackling of the fire and the faint, labored breathing of Bruno. Ethan sat on the wooden floor beside him, his fingers gently stroking the dog's fur, his heart twisting with guilt. "Please hold on," he whispered. Claire had done all she could, using herbs and cloth to clean and bind Bruno's wounds. But she was no healer, and the injuries ran deep. Oliver, too young to understand what had happened, sat nearby, his chubby hands patting Bruno's unmoving body. The child giggled softly as if trying to wake him. Tears burned at the corners of Ethan's eyes. He had almost killed the very creature that had saved his son. His own anger, his own fear had nearly cost him one of the most loyal friends he had ever known. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse, I don't know if he'll make it." Claire wiped at her tired eyes. "We have to try, Ethan. We owe him that much." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. They stayed beside Bruno all night, tending to him, whispering gentle reassurances, praying he would pull through. As dawn broke, something changed. A soft whimper. Bruno's ear twitched. Then slowly, his eyes fluttered open. Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Bruno?" The dog's eyes, though clouded with pain, met his. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Bruno was alive. Claire let out a relieved sob, hugging Oliver tightly. "Thank the heavens," she whispered. Ethan exhaled, reaching out to cup Bruno's face gently. I'm so sorry, boy, he murmured, his voice thick with regret. Bruno didn't move much, but his tail gave the faintest wag. Forgiveness. Ethan nearly broke down right there. He had thought he had lost Bruno forever. But this dog, this brave, selfless creature, was still fighting, and Ethan would make sure he never doubted him again. The days passed slowly. Bruno remained weak, unable to stand at first, but Ethan and Claire took turns nursing him back to health. Ethan brought fresh meat from his hunts, making sure Bruno ate small portions to regain his strength. Claire used herbs and warm compresses, speaking to him softly as she changed his bandages. Oliver, still young, crawled beside Bruno often, laughing and playing with his fur. Bruno's eyes, though tired, always watched over the child, just as he had before. And then one day, after nearly 2 weeks of rest, Bruno tried to stand. He struggled at first, his legs trembling beneath him. Ethan, kneeling beside him, held his breath. Come on, boy, he murmured. Bruno's muscles tensed. He pushed himself up, and after a few shaky moments, he stood. Claire gasped, and Oliver clapped his tiny hands together, giggling in delight. Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. Bruno was going to be okay. He reached forward, running a hand down the dog's back. You're the strongest soul I've ever met, Ethan whispered. Bruno let out a small huff, then slowly wagged his tail. Ethan smiled, rubbing behind his ears. We'll never doubt you again, boy. You're family. Bruno leaned into his touch, as if he had known that all along. Spring arrived, melting away the last traces of winter. The farm flourished, the crops grew tall, and the village whispered tales of the dog that had fought a wolf to save his family. People came to visit, wanting to see the legendary Bruno. But to Ethan, Claire, and Oliver, Bruno was simply theirs, their guardian, their friend, their protector. One evening, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, Ethan sat on the wooden porch, watching Oliver toddle around the yard. Bruno walked beside him, his gait steady once more. Ethan chuckled. You're still following him everywhere, huh? Bruno glanced at him before plopping down beside Oliver, keeping his ever-watchful eyes on the child. Ethan sighed, shaking his head in wonder. I almost lost you, Bruno, he murmured, and that was my fault. Bruno didn't react at first, but then he nudged Ethan's hand with his nose as if reassuring him. It was in the past. What mattered was now. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, rubbing Bruno's head. I'll never make that mistake again. Bruno closed his eyes for a moment. Content. Oliver, unaware of the deep bond now shared between his father and the dog, giggled as he tried to grab at Bruno's ears. Ethan laughed, watching them. As the sky darkened and the stars blinked into existence, Ethan looked at his home, his family, his loyal companion. And he knew everything was as it should be, because loyalty once earned should never be doubted. This story reminds us of the power of loyalty, kindness, and second chances. Bruno, despite being abandoned and wounded, gave his whole heart to the family that saved him. And when the time came, he proved his unwavering love and courage, risking his own life to protect the ones he cherished. But mistakes can happen, even in moments of fear and confusion. Ethan learned a painful lesson that day. True loyalty should never be doubted. Fortunately, he had the chance to redeem himself, to care for Bruno the way Bruno had always cared for them. This story teaches us that kindness, trust, and forgiveness are what make a family truly strong. No matter what, those who love us will always stand by our side. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment where loyalty and trust were tested? Share your thoughts with us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story. Stay kind, stay grateful.